Hey, so you're back for more there, you absolute masochist. Welcome back to episode 1, segment 3 of our video series, You Don't Need No Stinkin' Realtor Kid to Sell Your House. I am your host, Justin Dower, Spectrum Real Estate Consultants team at Keller Williams. Here we go. Episode 1 in our segment 3 regarding effective communication is a little bit of the why and more of the how on we go about the communication and setting proper expectations. Really cementing the lines of communication with all of the folks involved in a real estate transaction besides just yourself and the buyer. It is critically important to set expectations in a real estate transaction. There are many bodies in the room, and all of them need to stay on the same page with where we are in the transaction, what's needed in the transaction to move to the next step. And unfortunately, it is your job to keep everybody on that same page. And it's a bit like herding stray cats. It can be daunting and frustrating for certain, but we're going to go through a few of those concepts. So whether you're speaking with your buyer, you're speaking with your buyer's attorney, your own attorney, mortgage lenders, the loan officer in the mortgage lender's office, the inspectors, the appraisers, everybody needs to communicate with you. The buck stops at you, and you need to be redundant in your communication to make sure that everything is laid down factually and can be referenced at future dates. So first, we want to minimize misunderstandings and gaps in information, and doing so will make sure that your transaction goes through to the finish line in as swift a time as possible, which we understand time is money. That's not just an adage, it's reality, especially in a real estate transaction. If you are taking 1, 2, 3, 6 weeks longer than you should have or could have to actually affect your closing, making extra mortgage payments, you're making extra insurance payments, maintenance, whatever the costs might be for those extra 6 weeks, you're going to be stuck paying them if your transaction doesn't get across the finish line in a reasonable amount of time. Not only that, but time creates issues. There are many reasons that a real estate transaction should be affected in as short a time as possible, and they're not always just the reasons that affect you, Mr. or Mrs. Seller. There are concerns for the buyer and everybody else involved. Now, we would all probably agree that either in person or on the phone communication where we speak to one another is probably the most effective way to get concepts across to another human being. However, in today's world of 24-hour accountability, it's very difficult to have in person, certainly, and still even telephone conversations with folks. So relying solely on that creates problems. And in addition, telephone conversations aren't recorded, typically, and certainly not all of them, regardless. So following up with redundant email recaps on whatever was spoken about between you and somebody else involved in the real estate transaction, usually a big deal. So it's important to agree on the preferred methods of communication with each of the individuals involved with these transactions. Some folks just cannot find time in their schedule, and you won't be able to find time in their schedules to contact them on the phone. It'll have to happen through text and email. Difficult to get nuance across, tone of voice, these sorts of things, and you have to work around that. It's just the reality of today's world. There is also the human element to the communication process, and we need to understand what communication or lack thereof creates in a person's mind. So again, looking at the speed with which information can be shared and is expected to be shared in today's world, given that we all have very powerful computers in our pockets, if you are late or even delayed in rendering certain information that's been requested of you by random parties, could be an attorney, could be the bank attorney, could be the lender, could be whomever, that could be perceived as an inability to provide this information for some unknown reason. It could be perceived as maybe even willingly withholding that information to buy time for yourself or whomever can decide how to interpret that information. But you get the point. Being late, and that's a subjective term. Some people today, if you're not answering a text message question within a couple of hours, they're starting to wonder why. And that can create question marks in people's minds. Now, who cares? You can't please everybody, right? But it simply doesn't add up that way. Question marks in the mind of an inspector could make them think that you are trying to plug gaps in your home's maintenance before that they are allowed access to the home. It just creates that question mark in their mind. Maybe they're looking extra hard for defects. Maybe they are informing their buyer that they're not able to get a hold of you and they can't understand why. The same might be true of an appraiser. Who knows what a delay in communication might create in the minds of the people you are working with, but the sure bet is to not let that happen in the first place. So you've got to be open, approachable, genuine, available to everybody involved, and it can get pretty difficult to be detailed in that regard. Make sure you're taking lots of notes every time you talk to somebody. Again, follow up with those email recaps. Generally speaking, everybody in the transaction should be copied on information, but there are many exceptions. We'll be talking about that in later episodes during this segment and other segments. But suffice it to say, you need methods and systems in place to make sure that even you yourself aren't making mistakes when you're communicating with these different parties. Now, insofar as keeping everybody on the same page, it stands to reason that all we would need to do is put everybody on an email that's involved with this transaction and just make sure we hit reply all. And in lots of cases, that is a great method. At least it will make sure that everybody is informed on what's transpired, and we'll go over the exceptions to that rule in a later episode. But we need to remember the old adage that you are to praise in public and reprimand in private, because, folks, there are all sorts of age spectrums and technical savvy spectrums involved with the folks that are party to your real estate transaction, and they are not all created equally. So it would seem very easy to just ask, hey, in this big long email chain, folks, we all want to stay on the same page. Please hit reply all if you are going to be addressing me or addressing anybody else involved with this transaction, so that we can all keep track. And if somebody fails to do that, replying with everybody on the email chain saying like, hey, I told you we needed you to reply all and you're not doing this for the third time, what do I need to do? A little bit of snark in there. It's never going to go your way. People like doing business with people that they like, and if they find a reason to not like you, trust me, your real estate transaction is going to be more of an issue than you want it to be. So if you need to request again that somebody follow the rules that you have set out for your communication in your real estate transaction, do so on the sidelines and then bring them back into the fold. And in the reverse, it seems probably trivial, but most of us real estate professionals will follow up with a thank you email, reply all, thank you, to whomever issued any random piece of information that's necessary for this transaction. One, that cements that you've actually received that communication. Two, it thanks them for their diligence and encourages them to be so diligent on the next occasion. So that's really the concepts that I want to deliver in today's episode. We're going to dive a little bit more into what to say and how to say it and what questions to ask during offer collecting when you're receiving offers for your home, and a little bit on how to make those offers a little bit more concrete in your own mind, what questions to ask of whom so you know you're choosing the right offer. And we'll get into that one in just a bit. Peace.